This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I hope you all had a happy holiday. I hope you all had a good, New Year's, everything like that. We got a lot to talk about in today's episode. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. First of all, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can do it really easily, really quickly. Just go to the main page of our show, the GSMC Sports Podcast, and whatever you're listening to this on, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you'll see probably in the top right-hand corner-ish, or maybe even dead center, a little button that just has a plus sign next to it and also says subscribe. If you could hit that button for us, that would mean the absolute world to us. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you want to get those alerts and those notifications on your phone, on your laptop, on your watch, on whatever device you might be listening to this on. And again, you'll get those alerts and notifications, and you'll know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. When we release it, you won't have to go look at Twitter or just go, check casually. You'll get those alerts whenever they are released, and then you can, be one of the first people to listen to a new episode again when we release it. So please, if you could subscribe to the podcast on our main page, whatever application or even website you're listening to this on, Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, please subscribe to us on all those great platforms. We would really appreciate it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. Also, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general if you are enjoying the content and discussion points of the show, the production, everything that goes on behind the scenes with our great team as well. So if you're just enjoying the show overall, we'd love it if you leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same main page, on that same website or application. Again, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Podbean. You can leave us a review. If you want to write something, you can do that as well, but as long as you just leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, we would really appreciate that if you are enjoying the content of this show just in general. So again, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, in general, anything like that. And also, if you could give us a follow on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Just overall, we would love to interact with you guys more on there. So if you follow us on all of those great social media platforms, again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Over on social media, we can talk about sports. We can talk about, maybe some NFL playoff games, maybe whatever the main NBA game is on that night on TNT or ESPN. But just overall on social media, we can talk to you guys, again, about sports breaking news, about anything sports related that you guys want to talk about. Social media is the place to do that, especially in real time. Again, with the, landscape of the NFL and NBA always changing, player movement, games happening, trades, injuries, whatever it may be. Social media is the best way to find our immediate reaction, maybe, or something like that. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would absolutely love it. In addition to subscribing to the podcast and leaving us that review, if you could follow us on all those great social media platforms. One more time, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy, healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have a fantastic show for you all today. Coming up later on at the show, at the very end, I want to give you my NBA awards predictions. We have reached the All-Star break in an incredible NBA season. A lot of surprise teams doing better than we thought. A lot of teams vying for some playoff positions in both the East and West. The trade deadline's coming up. That's going to be very exciting. But at the end of today's show, I want to give you my MVP predictions, just all my awards, Coach of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. I'll be breaking down each and every award coming up at the very end of the show as we have reached kind of the halfway point of the NBA season, sort of the latter half, the more important half, pushing towards the playoffs. We see some races and things like that, some trades hopefully as well, so it's going to be interesting. So again, at the very end of the episode, I'll be breaking down my predictions for each and every NBA award up until this point. Also, coming up later on the show, I want to do another mock draft. I said I would do these every few weeks after we get some more reports and some more, footage of guys from pro days and things like that, and we have a better understanding of where teams may lean position-wise and prospect-wise. So I have a lot of surprises coming up. We'll again do the top 10 coming up at the not the end of today's show, but probably the third segment in the second half. We'll be doing that mock draft, and also later on in the show, I want to be giving you my top 5 quarterbacks in this class. I've seen a lot of people been doing their ranking systems who are the top 5, top 6 quarterbacks in this draft class. Chris Sims recently did one that got a lot of hate on Twitter. It was very controversial. I'll be doing my top 5 quarterbacks in this class and giving you a pro comparison for each of those guys. I've been looking at tape on them all week, and I think I have a good NFL pro comparison for you guys who maybe don't watch as much college football. Maybe I can put an image in your mind of how that guy plays, play style wise, maybe even some sort of success wise in the NFL, what kind of system they could do well in. So that's also coming up later on the show. But I want to start off with a team that made an uber aggressive move and a team that might be on the cusp of making an aggressive move. And those are the Bears and the Cardinals. So in a few minutes, I will get to the Cardinals and the J.J. Watt signing, what that means for them. But I want to start off today's episode with the Chicago Bears of all teams. Over the last few days, a couple of reports have come out that have signaled that the Bears are going to be really aggressive in looking for a new quarterback this offseason. It's clear that Ryan Pace is pretty self-aware that he's probably on the hot seat this season. Same thing with Matt Nagy. If they have an off year, obviously they butchered the quarterback situation in the draft when, of course, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes were available. They didn't even speak to, Deshaun Watson apparently. I think only had one interview with Patrick Mahomes and were set and sold on Mitch Trubisky with that second overall pick, and things haven't really worked out to their liking at the QB spot. But there's 2 quarterbacks who could potentially be on the market, and both seem to be relatively interested in Chicago. Those quarterbacks being Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. Now, in the Russell Wilson report, there was just some things being talked about how the Bears are prioritizing trading for Russell Wilson, and that Russell is loving Chicago and really likes their roster and their young offensive line, and Matt Nagy is an offensive mind, and of course their defense is really good as well. And he also was intrigued by the market of Chicago. And for the Deshaun Watson report, there was a report that came out that said if Deshaun Watson were to be made available, because again, the Texans haven't even started picking up the phone and listening to those trade offers from teams like the Dolphins, the Jets, the Panthers. They haven't even answered the phone. They're still leaving voicemails at this point. But if he were to become available, it would be hard to find a team that would be more aggressive in searching for Deshaun Watson or trading for Deshaun Watson than Chicago. So it's clear that this team, the Chicago Bears, want a superstar quarterback, and they want it now. And of course, they have made the playoffs twice under Mitch Trubisky, which I think is a testament to Matt Nagy and how good of a coach he is. I don't think I would group Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy in the same category. A lot of people in the NFL like to group head coach and GM partnerships together, and if one goes, they both have to go. That's not necessarily the case. You can have a good coach and a bad GM, or a great GM and a bad coach. They don't have to coexist together. It's not like they're both good or both bad. They're completely separate jobs, and even though they might have been hired at the same times, or maybe even have a relationship, a lot of GMs hire guys who they worked with past teams and things like that. Even if they had a prior relationship with a different organization, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are joint at the hip at level of success. I think Matt Nagy is an incredible coach. He went to the playoffs 2 out of the 4 years he's been there with Mitch Trubisky as his quarterback and a little bit of Nick Foles. 2 guys who I think we can all agree on are not starting quarterbacks in the National Football League, should probably be backups. I know that we know Foles won the championship with Philadelphia and went on that incredible 4-game run, but that was years ago now. He's not that player and really probably never was that player. And we obviously know the struggles that Trubisky has had throughout his entire career with the Bears so far. But despite all that, Matt Nagy has brought that roster to the playoffs twice, and it's not like he's playing in the NFC East, which is one of the worst divisions in football. He's playing in a pretty competent division. Now, the Lions are not good year in, year out, but they are a talented team when they had Matt Stafford, so they weren't an easy out. The Packers are obviously good each and every year, and the Vikings have their moments for sure. Kirk Cousins sort of an up and down year. I feel like the Vikings make the playoffs almost every other year, maybe not consistently like teams like the Packers or the the did, or the Chiefs do now or anything like that. But for sure, they are at least wild card conversation team year in, year out, similar to Chicago. And Matt Nagy went to the playoffs 2 out of the last 4 years. Now, if he could just get a quarterback to run the offensive system that I think blends a lot of Andy Reid type styles with some Doug Peterson type styles as well, really have an offensive mind in Matt Nagy that has a lot of creativity in the backfield with some motions and some sets. They like to throw the deep ball a lot. Allen Robinson, while he did work out of the slot a lot as well, you know how he did over the top with the deep ball. Darnell Mooney, of course, is a pure speed guy who I think Nagy recently said could be a Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Jackson type player for this offense. Now, it's unclear if Allen Robinson is going to stay, but I've also heard some rumors that they could be looking after guys like Golden Tate and Will Fuller in free agency. They obviously have two really good backs in Tariq Cohen and Montgomery as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Bears situation plays out going forward, because it appears that they have the defense. It looks like they have the offensive weaponry. Maybe they could add a receiver unless Cole Kmet really develops into that stud tight end. I could see them maybe looking after a veteran like Jared Cook or something like that. Russell Wilson with that good offensive line and that stud defense could really thrive. And I really want to focus in here on Russell Wilson because apparently, according to reports, the Seahawks are answering calls for Russell Wilson. Not necessarily shopping him or looking to move him, but they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to hear what you have to say at least about a trade. And if they get something that they simply can't refuse, then they would move off of him. It reminds me a lot of the situation of, if you remember, when the Miami Dolphins traded Laramie Tunsil, who was this stud, super young left tackle. Nobody understood how it happened. It sort of came out of nowhere. And that was just the Dolphins general manager Chris Greer accepting calls for pretty much anybody on the roster, saying, if you give us an offer, sort of everybody has a price type deal. And eventually, when you give up 2 first-round picks in 2 seconds, a deal can be made and a deal can happen. So for Russell Wilson, he's going to cost a lot more than that. And again, in my last episode, I described the Cowboys, in my opinion, as the team that had the best shot at trading for him. But after sort of re-evaluating sort of that stance on that, I want to change my tune. I think the Bears actually have the best chance of acquiring him out of any of these teams. Now, some of it has to do with the recent reporting, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, about them being uber aggressive looking for a quarterback. We haven't heard a lot of draft chatter and draft buzz with the Bears when it comes to the QB position. Again, Ryan Pace is definitely on the hot seat, and so is probably Matt Nagy, unfortunately. So they can't really or don't really have the time to draft a Trey Lance or a guy that might take a year or two to develop and get off the ground, because they simply don't have that time. They would at that point be drafting a quarterback for the next coach and GM to fix and work around and build around. So they're going to want to go after a guy, a veteran who can win now, a guy like Russell Wilson. So if he's available, the Chicago Bears are going to put their best foot forward. Again, a lot of this has to do with Pete Carroll, specifically in the Russell Wilson situation, because it appears that Pete Carroll has a little bit more power in the organization than maybe Russell Wilson is comfortable with or likes. And it seems to be a power dynamic of I am the coach and you are the player. But we know with superstar quarterbacks, they want input on the roster, on trades, on free agency, on who they draft, the weaponry, the scheme, the O-line, all of that stuff. And they deserve it. They're the face of the franchise. They're the ones who are usually the captains of the team. They answer every media question. And again, they are the face of that team and that organization. And while they do get paid the most amount of money in the NFL, they definitely make the most amount of money for their owners and things like that through jersey sales. And of course, you can't win a Super Bowl without usually an elite quarterback, or at least an above average quarterback, and a great roster around him. So the Bears are going after a guy like Russell Wilson because they know that they have the weaponry and the roster to compete at a high level. They're already competing and making the playoffs again 2 out of the last 4 years. So again, Pete Carroll's philosophy, considering he might be the reason why this rift might happen, has always been to run the ball and play defense. And again, one of the few things that Chicago does really, really well right now is run the ball and play defense. Now, I told you that it's going to cost a lot for Russell Wilson, right? And I told you if he was going to go to Dallas, it would require Dak Prescott, and maybe Pete Carroll would want to build around him or something like that. But maybe Pete Carroll, after all, will, I know he's on the older side, so it's hard to envision him maybe drafting a quarterback or something like that. But maybe he wants to take that, 15th to 18th overall pick that the Bears have, attach that with Khalil Mack and a couple of other firsts down the line, probably get 3 firsts, 3 to 5 firsts, 3 to 5 seconds. Khalil Mack is how I would assume that trade works. Again, something unprecedented. A guy like Russell Wilson being available via trade hasn't happened in the NFL really ever. Same thing with the Deshaun Watson situation. So you're going to see 3+ first-round picks, especially if guys like Laramie Tunsil and Jamal Adams are count for 2 first-round picks and Khalil Mack as well. Then the price for the quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson is going to start at a minimum of 3 first-round picks and 2 seconds, in my opinion. You give them all the picks, you give them Khalil Mack. They kind of revamps that Seattle defense, that Seattle pass rush, that physicality that maybe Pete Carroll would fall in love with again. Of course, the offensive weapons that Seattle has are really, really good with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Carson if they re-sign him as well. That offensive line could use some boost, but maybe if they take some of those picks that they got from the Russell Wilson trade and trade up for a guy like Trey Lance, Fields, or hey, maybe even Zach Wilson if you want to give him all, go all the way up to 2, but I think the Jets are going to take him. Or maybe go for a guy like Sam Darnold. You could have a younger, cheaper quarterback with this stacked roster and add that guy like Khalil Mack. Maybe Pete Carroll thinks he can win like that. And again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with it. I think Russell Wilson is really the main reason and potentially the only reason why the Seattle Seahawks are considered an elite franchise, an elite team. Again, hasn't had a losing season since he's entered the league. Last year threw for over 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. The last time Russell Wilson had a quarterback rating under 100 was 2017. Again, never a losing season since he's entered the league. You see why Chicago wants him, and you're sort of perplexed why Seattle might move off of him. But if the Bears can add a guy like Russell Wilson, I think Matt Nagy is a better coach than people give him credit for. And if he can get that really awesome superstar quarterback, Andy Reid was really, really good for the Eagles and never won the big game until he got Patrick Mahomes. Bill Belichick hasn't done anything pre and post to Tom Brady. So you need that superstar quarterback as a coach to envision your offensive dream and the system you want to run for your football team. I don't think Matt Nagy has gotten that quarterback yet, despite how long Mitch Trubisky has been there for. I understand that they didn't move off of him maybe as quickly as Arizona moved off of Josh Rosen or something like that. But still, it's still a significant move and a significant play to go after, not make the playoffs with him twice. I don't want to hate on him. Again, I don't think he's the worst quarterback in the world. I just don't think he's an NFL starter. But again, Matt Nagy went to the playoffs with him twice, including last year, beating out a good Arizona team with Kyler Murray, who I'll talk about in a second here as well. But I think if they could add a guy like Russell Wilson, it would be really, really fun to watch. The Chicago Bears with Russell Wilson led by versus Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers reignite the best rivalry in football, which is Packers versus Bears. It would be so much fun to watch and see that play out. And yeah, it'd be really exciting to see Russell Wilson with the Chicago Bears. And again, if Russell Wilson is moved, I think Chicago would probably be the most likely destination for a guy like Russell Wilson, specifically since out of all those 4 teams he put on this list, they probably have the easiest path to a trade, unless the Cowboys would be willing to move off of a guy like Dak Prescott. Now, quickly, I want to switch to the other major NFL news this week, and that was J.J. Watt officially picking a team. It wasn't the Steelers, it wasn't the Packers, it wasn't the Browns, it wasn't the Bills, like a lot of people, including myself, predicted he might go to. It was the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals didn't offer J.J. Watt the most money. They didn't offer him the most guarantees or anything like that. Yet he still decided to go play in the hardest division in football in Arizona, going against teams like Seattle, San Francisco, and the LA Rams twice a year. But I think it's a fascinating move. Now, the Arizona Cardinals, who were a top 5 teams in sacks last year, have Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt, who are 2 of probably the top 3 to 4 veteran pass rushers in the league, veterans being probably over 30, 32, 33. I'd probably say J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones are certainly up there. No guys have more sacks in the last couple of years than they do. They've been doing it for a long time, but they're still super effective. And again, this Cardinals offense has a lot of weapons and a lot of ideas. They just need to all be translated on paper. Again, I think this offensive line needs a little bit of a more boost. I saw Kyler Murray got a little bit too banged up last year. He never really missed any games because of it, but he was definitely going through a little bit of a month period where he wasn't athletic as he could be because of his injuries that he was going through. So that offensive line definitely needs a bolster. I'd like to honestly see them add another wide receiver. I could see them going after a guy like Rashad Bateman, who I love, Rondale Moore, guys like that. The tight end position is something to look out to with Arizona, the running back position as well. But they add that defensive guy in J.J. Watt, and this team was clearly upset with missing the playoffs last year. They were competing for that last playoff spot in the NFC with the Chicago Bears. Didn't get it because of that last week of the season. And J.J. Watt said something really interesting to me because he said he came to Arizona because he believed in Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was arguably the greatest high school player in Texas history. J.J. Watt, obviously playing a majority of his NFL career in Texas, took notice and believes in him. And he said that was one of the main reasons, if not the biggest reason, why he decided to come play for the Arizona Cardinals. And this just goes back to the idea of, I think the league is also noticing that Kyler Murray is a special type of player. Again, the great ones have something that is completely unexplainable to them. Tom Brady's winning this. How does he keep doing it despite not being the greatest athlete in the world? Russell Wilson never gets hit. Aaron Rodgers, Dan Marino's release. All of these special qualities that these special quarterbacks and all-time great players have. Kyler Murray has that unexplainable quality about him. His quick feet in comparison to his size, how can he hang up in the NFL and how can he dominate certain games in the NFL? He has a unique ability as well, including Lamar Jackson, to take over a game with his athletic ability. I think even though he doesn't necessarily run just like Lamar, he certainly has a ton of escapability and can totally reset his feet and flick it down the field. And again, he generates so much velocity on the ball when he throws it. I love his throwing motion. It's so clean. It's so concise. It's pretty quick given his size as well. And again, he gets the ball there, 60 yards if he has to, because of the velocity that he generates. And again, I don't think there's a throw in the book he can't make. And this just goes back to say that I think Kyler Murray's a really special player. But this year in particular, with the addition of J.J. Watt, is a make-or-break year for Cliff Kingsbury. Again, I was not sold when they hired him as a head coach. I did understand the decision to move off of Rosen and go with Kyler Murray. Again, I loved Kyler Murray in college. And even if, Cliff Kingsbury wasn't the head coach of Arizona, I would have understood the move to move off him. Again, I thought he was a special player in college, and I think he's a special player now. But for Cliff Kingsbury to get the guy that he wants, they have given him complete keys to the organization. You do your offense exactly how you want to do it with your players, with your quarterback you've wanted since you recruited him out of college. And for him to miss the playoffs last year, I thought was a really big deal, even after adding DeAndre Hopkins. Now you've also added J.J. Watt, so the defense will get better. Everybody in that division has obviously gotten better this year, despite maybe the Seahawks, especially if they move off of Russell Wilson. But San Francisco will get better just by being healthy. Of course, we know the Rams added Matthew Stafford, so that division is the best in football, and J.J. Watt wants that competition apparently because he wants to go to war and go to battle with Kyler Murray every single Sunday, and I think he made a wise choice. I think Kyler Murray is that special of a player. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. We're going to take a short break, but on the other side of this break, I'm going to be ranking the quarterbacks in this year's draft class. I'm going to be giving you my top 5 and giving you a pro NFL player comparison for each of them. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you my spiel on everything Chicago and Arizona when it comes to the NFL. Again, if the Bears could add a superstar talent like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, but more likely Russell Wilson, I think Matt Nagy's dream of his offense with the creativity would really come to fruition. And I think the Bears would be a really, really good team next year. And I'd say they may win a minimum of 10 games. They'd even compete for that division. I would seriously put them at the top of the NFC with that defense. Even if they had to give up Khalil Mack, they still have guys like Roquan Smith and a stud defensive forefront, specifically in the trenches as well. Still Fuller, of course, the corner, Eddie Jackson, the safety. There's still a lot of pieces on that team. I know Khalil Mack gets all the clicks and all the headlines, but Roquan Smith might be a top 7 linebacker in football at this point. Definitely a top 5 young linebacker in football. He's incredible. If you love Devin White, you'll love a guy like Roquan Smith. Shoots out of a cannon, hits hard, can pretty much go sideline to sideline with running backs and tight ends. He's absolutely phenomenal. So I want to continue with the NFL here, and specifically quarterbacks, because a lot of people have been ranking the main 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft class, the 5 being, of course, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Trevor Lawrence. Those are the 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft class that everybody believes will be going in the first round this year. There's also guys like Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask, that guys like Chris Sims mentioned and things like that. I don't talk about those guys as nearly as much as I do about these 5, because I believe all 5 of these guys will be going in the first round, and I think all 5 of these guys have a chance going top 15. I think if the market doesn't plan out the way that some people think, maybe if Matt Ryan isn't traded or if Jimmy G isn't traded from San Francisco and there's less free agent options than people are maybe expecting, teams like the Patriots, Panthers, also if Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson aren't traded, of course, then all of these opportunities could have to be found in the draft. And a lot of teams could decide after their favorite free agent quarterback got signed, or maybe if Russell Wilson got moved to a different team or they didn't land Deshaun Watson, they could easily decide we're just going to sit tight through free agency and wait till the draft. So what I've done here is ranked these 5 quarterbacks in order from best to worst in my opinion. I've also given you guys a pro comparison on how I believe they play, and also a perfect team fit. Now, this isn't necessarily where they are going to go. I think it's a little bit of a combination of a team that I think could realistically get this quarterback and also would be a perfect fit for specifically the quarterback going forward. I think where you land in the NFL matters, and I think we really see that with quarterbacks, maybe more than any other position in football. If usually, you see these guys who fall in the later half of the first round end up with better teams having better careers. You see what happened with Mahomes. You see what happened with Lamar Jackson, all those types of things. But I think you can still go at the early top of the draft to be an incredible quarterback. Look at Andrew Luck. Look at Justin Herbert last year. We know all that stuff. So let's get right into it here. Coming in at number 5, I have Mac Jones. Now, I think Mac Jones is a nice quarterback prospect. I do not, however, believe he was the quarterback prospect that Tua Tagovailoa was last year. And that's the comparison that people keep coming back to because they're from the same system and they're from the same school. Yes, Mac Jones might have put up better numbers than Tua Tagovailoa did, but then you have to remember Tua Tagovailoa missed a bunch of games because of that hip injury. And while Mac Jones deserves all the credit in the world for having an incredible season last year, and he definitely deserves to be an NFL quarterback, and I think he definitely is one, I just don't know if he's at that level that I think Tua Tagovailoa is as a prospect, where I think he could develop into a superstar despite what might be going on around him and things like that. So coming back to Mac Jones, I think his pro comparison would be a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. Mac Jones has the football IQ. He has a decent ability to read defenses. He's got a pretty quick release, and he's accurate in the short intermediate game for sure. And he's got a really nice ball placement skill that I think a lot of quarterbacks need in the NFL. I love his ball placement on slants. I love his ball placement on screens. Of course, Steve Sarkisian at Alabama ran a ton of those with guys like Devontae Smith and Najee Harris and Jalen Waddle. But he can, in theory, make every throw in the book. Now, would I want him in coldy Chicago in the downpouring of snow to throw a heave 65 yards? Would I trust a guy like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes more? For sure. But does he have a good enough arm? Definitely. I think it might have even been Tua in the media compared him to a more mobile Tom Brady. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I would say Jimmy Garoppolo is a really nice pro comparison for him. Accurate, smart, knows the system, knows where to put the ball on the receiver's hands. And again, everything, the intangibles, the leadership, is all there. A perfect draft fit for him, even though I don't think he will be drafted by this team, is the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints have a top 5 roster in the NFL. They're currently cutting veterans and, renegotiating contracts to try to make the money work, to maybe go after another run with Drew Brees if he doesn't retire, but it looks like he's going to, or try to do something with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. If they could stay pat in their pick, which is in the mid-20s, I believe, and get a guy like Mac Jones, that is where I could see Mac Jones thriving in a team that has a buttload of weapons, an incredible offensive mind in Sean Payton, and really, when you're coming from a team in Alabama that has a great O-line, great weapons, great defense, great coach, you sort of need that in the NFL. So once he gets to the NFL, is he going to get that great coach, those great weapons, that great defense? He would get all 3 of those things with the New Orleans Saints, and I think that would be the perfect fit for Mac Jones. And honestly, if he were drafted by the Saints, I would say he would have an incredible rookie campaign, because again, he's a really nice ball distributor. He's a really nice guy who can run your system. I think he's got the football IQ to run a complicated system like Sean Payton. He was already running a really complicated system with Steve Sarkisian, filled with motions and things like that. Again, the quarterback has to know all of those things, specifically for audibles and sort of changing coverages and pass protections and things like that as well. So I think Mac Jones to the New Orleans Saints would be just a glove fit for both those teams. I understand that most mocks are going to have him probably falling to 15 at the lowest. So I don't think he'll end up being a New Orleans Saint, but that would be the perfect fit for Mac Jones, in my opinion. Coming in at number 4, I have Trey Lance, the Dakota State quarterback. Of course, he didn't have a great season this year because, again, he didn't really have one because of COVID. He played in that one game, did decently, but he's really going to make his money. Again, would have if there was a combine, but at his pro day. A pro comparison I have for him is Josh Allen-ish, because I think he has some Josh Allen in him, some Deshaun Watson in him. But again, he is your standard project quarterback of this year's draft class guy, coming from a school that usually doesn't produce a ton of NFL talent. Josh Allen out of Wyoming has all of the physical traits. I'm pretty sure Lance is 6'4", 6'5", probably 225, 230. And of course, his last season threw for 28 touchdowns, no interceptions, also ran for 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. He's a dual threat guy, and he, from an athletic ability and from a traits ability, he looks like he could do it all. And if he could do what Josh Allen did, which is find a team that's going to give him the time to put all these things together. Again, don't forget, it took Josh Allen 3 years to get to the level he was at now. I could see him being the next Josh Allen, the guy with all the traits coming from the no-name school that goes to the team, that gives him some time to develop and become the player that he's supposed to be, and is patient with him. I could see Trey Lance taking some lumps early, rookie year, if he's going to play that early like Josh Allen did. But again, if he goes to the right team, the right system with the right coach, a guy who could maybe help him put it all together from the athletic ability with his legs to the throwing ability with his arm. Again, he doesn't turn the ball over, 0 interceptions his last full year starting. A perfect fit for him would be the Carolina Panthers. They're in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, but let's say Deshaun Watson is traded to the Miami Dolphins or the New York Jets. Trey Lance would be a perfect guy to put in there. Similar skill set, similar traits. You could run a similar system if you wanted to do something with a dual threat level quarterback. Again, he doesn't turn the ball over. We know Joe Brady and Matt Rule like guys who are smart, that aren't going to take care of the football, that aren't going to take any unnecessary risk. Trey Lance doesn't do that. He's got the athletic ability as well. And the Panthers are absolutely stacked with offensive weapons. They're 3 wide receivers deep with Moore, Anderson, and Curtis Samuel if they bring him back. They have a top 2 running back in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey. If he's not first, he's got to be second in your book. And that defense is obviously improving as well. They play in a tough division with the reigning Super Bowl champions, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Falcons obviously always have an electric offense. But the Saints are going to take a step back this year because of their quarterback issue. And of course, you'll just let the Bucs thing sort of ride out with Tom Brady while you develop Trey Lance. And hopefully, according to your plan, your rebuild will really start to reach its peak when Tom Brady's done in Tampa Bay, and you can sort of take off from there. So again, Trey Lance, give him 2 to 3 years to develop. You have a veteran there in Teddy Bridgewater, who I think would be a nice guy to have as a veteran, as a mentor, something like that for Trey Lance. So keep an eye on them. And again, I have him as sort of like Josh Allen-ish. If you see from Trey Lance, watch some highlights of him. He's a lot of fun to watch. So coming in at number 4 is Trey Lance. Coming in at number 3 is Justin Fields, the Ohio State quarterback. Now, every single year in the NFL draft, we have an over-scrutinized quarterback prospect and a guy who comes out of nowhere and shoots up the draft board. So Justin Fields is this year's overly scrutinized prospect. Last year it was Justin Herbert, where guys sort of picked apart his game. And that's sort of what happens when we hear about guys in the national, in college football for years now. We knew that, Justin Fields was a great player last year before he was even draft eligible. So once you sort of see the same thing each and every week, you start to nitpick, you start to notice every single little mistake that a guy makes. But we're just not that far off or really removed from the best game of Justin Fields' life in that semifinal game against Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be the number 1 overall pick, where he outplayed him from start to finish. I don't forget games like that at the biggest moment in the biggest stage. I love Justin Fields' competitiveness, his leadership. If you want to get to know more about him, you should watch the QB1 series on Netflix. He was on one of those seasons. I think maybe even the first season. He has a cool story of going to Georgia, then eventually transferring to Ohio State. He would have been my second quarterback this year until obviously Zach Wilson sort of shot up everybody's draft board, as again, he's the quarterback prospect this year that sort of came out of nowhere and blew up, while Justin Fields is sort of last year's Justin Herbert, overly scrutinized. But if he goes to the right team and the right system, he could have a Justin Herbert type impact year 1. He could be just that good out of the gate because, again, he's got the ability. He's 6'3". He can run. He can make every throw in the book. He's got a cannon for an arm, incredible leadership intangibles. Guys rally around him, love to play with him. I don't think you can hold his head, or you really can hold him accountable for that Alabama performance. He was banged up with broken ribs. And again, they were never going to beat Alabama. That was the best team far and away. They weren't even supposed to beat Clemson, yet they did. A perfect fit for Justin Fields, in my opinion, is with the Atlanta Falcons, because my pro comparison for him is a more talented version of Ryan Tannehill. I think Ryan Tannehill in the Tennessee phase of his career, when he uses his mobility, when he runs the read option, when he uses the bootlegs and his throw on the run ability, is really at his best. And I think Justin Fields is the same way. He's not going to wow you with his ability to read a defense and go through his progressions with multiple reads, but he is going to wow you with his ability to throw into tight windows, throw on the run as well, and really just buy time for your offensive line and his weapons to get open. Now, a guy can obviously be coached in a better ability of reading defenses and going through progressions. What you can't coach is the the physical talent and the traits that he has, and Justin Fields really presents those. When you watch him play at his best, he looks like a taller version of Russell Wilson, but I don't necessarily think he will become that in the NFL. I think Russell Wilson's a little bit above that, and it's, again, hard for me to compare guys to Hall of Famers, potentials, and things like that. So I'm going to go with a more talented version of Ryan Tannehill, so I think he will be a better version of Ryan Tannehill. So why wouldn't there be a better fit than with Ryan Tannehill's old offensive coordinator, now Atlanta Falcon head coach Arthur Smith? Again, you don't have to play Justin Fields right away. You can sit him that entire year if you're that concerned about him reading defenses and going through progressions. Let Matt Ryan play it out for this 1 year. He's got 2 years left on that contract. Let him ride out one of those years and give Justin Fields the key next year when you move Matt Ryan to a team like San Francisco for a pick or something like that. The Falcons have all the weapons in the world, though, as well. If they wanted to give a guy like Justin Fields a go his rookie year, he wouldn't be killed like maybe, Tua was throwing to no weapons and things like that his rookie year, and same with Joe Burrow. It would be a little bit different with Justin Fields in Atlanta because of how good the offensive weaponry is there for him. So for that reason, I have the Atlanta Falcons being the number one fit for Justin Fields. Coming in at number 2, I have Zach Wilson, who my pro comparison for him is Mahomes light. So I think he does a lot of things that Patrick Mahomes does. I just don't think he does any of them at Patrick Mahomes level, and that's comparing the two college tapes together. So I'd say a less talented version of Patrick Mahomes or a more mobile version of Matt Stafford, if you want to look at that. He's got that elastic band-like arm, can throw from crazy arm angles off platform. I am a little concerned with how he faces pressure, specifically in his face from the interior offensive line. BYU did a fantastic job of getting him off the ground and not really getting hit at all, and didn't face a lot of pressure. But when he's given time to really execute the game plan on the routes, he can hit every route in the route tree and throw every single ball you need him to do, and give you some of that flashes of Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson-esque speed and mobility. I don't think he's quite at their level, but he's pretty darn close. So I would say a more mobile version of Matt Stafford, or Mahomes light, whichever way you want to envision it. And the perfect match for me is the New York Jets. They have a ton of money to go get him some weapons, go sign Allen Robinson, go sign Aaron Jones, do stuff like that. They have a defensive coach in Robert Saleh who's going to make that Jets defense talented and definitely better than it's been in years past, which is always great for a rookie quarterback. And again, I don't want to say another team that he's not going to go to, because I think we're all in agreement that Zach Wilson will be a New York Jet, specifically at the end of April, after they officially came out and said that they're answering calls for Sam Darnold. So I think Mahomes light, or more mobile version of Matt Stafford, or of course Zach Wilson, will be going to the New York Jets, and I think that is the perfect spot for him. And of course, number 1 is Trevor Lawrence, the best quarterback prospect potentially ever, since at least Andrew Luck, in my opinion. The perfect fit's the Jacksonville Jaguars. If there was another fit, it wouldn't even matter because he's going there. A pro comparison I have for him is a more talented version of Justin Herbert. We saw how good Justin Herbert was last year. Take it up another level. Everything that Justin Herbert is good to great at, Trevor Lawrence is elite at. When it comes to football IQ, when it comes to traits, big arm, big throw, everything like that. The only thing I think that's a downside of him is his size. I would like him to add a little bit more weight. He's got the height, but I like him to beef up a little bit more just to see if he can push some defenders and some defensive ends off him, like Justin Herbert did in college and pro. And like Josh Allen does, obviously, as well. But again, perfect fit for him is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, the pro comparison for him is a better version of Justin Herbert. Those are my top 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft class. Again, we have Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 2, Justin Fields 3, Trey Lance 4, and Mac Jones 5. Let me know how you have ranked those 5 quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft, and what's your perfect landing spot for each of those guys. We're taking another short break here, and we're going to stick with a draft sort of theme, and I'm going to be giving you my top 10 mock draft. Again, I did this a few weeks ago where I gave you my top 10 pick predictions. After some more reporting and gathering information, I've come out with an updated mock draft. I'll give you the top 10 picks of those right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masper. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you everything, quarterback class for the 2021 NFL draft class. Again, those are my top 5 quarterbacks in this year's class. Again, I think all of them have the chance to go maybe as high as top 15. I think at least 4 of them will. I think the top 4 will definitely go top 15. I think the top 4 has a chance to go even top 10 if they really wanted to, depending on where Lance goes. I think Mac Jones will go in the top 15. He's the only guy I could see slipping to the 20s. Speaking of NFL draft, I want to give you an updated look at my top 10 mock draft. Again, I like to do these every few weeks once we get some more information and things like that on who guys might be drafted by and why. So let's get right into it here. Of course, with the first overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to take Trevor Lawrence. I think we all know that this is what's going to happen. They saw him at the Pro Day. He looked incredible. Urban Meyer had a front row seat. I've heard some reports that they're probably talking to Zach Wilson. I'm sure they're going to do their due diligence and talk to every single quarterback prospect, again, because I don't want to mess this up. But Trevor Lawrence is far and away, I don't want to say far and away, but is definitely the best quarterback prospect in this class. I think Wilson did a lot this year to make an argument to be a close 2, but at the end of the day, I still think there's a gap between those two. Just what Lawrence does from IQ-wise, everything like that, what he can handle. Again, I'd like him to beef up just a little bit. If he could be a little bit heavier, gain some muscle, that'd be great, so I could see him push off and break some sacks like we see Josh Allen does so many times and Justin Herbert was doing last year. I'd like to see that given his size, but at the end of the day, he's got every single thing in the book, can make every throw, and is really just exactly what you want in an NFL quarterback. So with the first overall pick, I believe the Jacksonville Jaguars will be taking Trevor Lawrence. With the second pick in the draft, I think the Jets will also be going quarterback and taking Zach Wilson. Joe Douglas recently said really publicly that they will be taking calls on Sam Darnold, meaning that they've gone through their process and they like the guys in this draft class more than they like Sam Darnold, meaning they will be moving off of him. Keep an eye on teams like Chicago, Washington, maybe even Carolina, New England. All these teams that need quarterbacks that might not be able to get them via the draft could look at a guy like Sam Darnold as a reclamation project. Either way, I think they go with the exciting Zach Wilson guy who can do a lot of stuff off platform, make some plays for your team, and just overall playmaker. And that's what the Jets need. They need that spark. They need that playmaker, and I think they get it in Zach Wilson with the second overall pick at quarterback. Third is the Miami Dolphins. Now, I do think at the end of the day they will end up trading, but for this in particular mock draft, I didn't want to do any trades in the top 10, given with all the rumors. So this is a no-trade top 10. I should have said this at the beginning. But with 3, I think the Miami Dolphins are going to shock some people. Now, recently, and really since Brian Flores and Chris Greer have come into, power with the Miami Dolphins, they don't do what people expect. They're surprise cuts. We saw them just release Kyle Van Noy out of the blue. People don't know what the Miami Dolphins are doing. And again, we used to see a lot of leaks coming out of there, but they're a well-run organization now. They have a coach that comes from New England that's not going to talk to the media and let things go lightly. Nobody expected them to cut Kyle Van Noy. They ended up doing it. A lot of people have them taking receiver, have them going Jamar Chase, and have them going Devontae Smith. I do think they'll take an offensive weapon in 3. I just don't think it's the one that people think. I have the Miami Dolphins taking Kyle Pitts at 3rd overall. In my opinion, Kyle Pitts is the best player in this draft. Doesn't matter regardless of position. Yes, I think Trevor Lawrence is an all-time type talent, and I think he's a can't-miss quarterback prospect. I think Penei Sewell is maybe the best tackle prospect to come out of the draft since, who knows, Joe Thomas maybe. But when it comes to Kyle Pitts, I think he, besides Lawrence, is the only... There's only 3 guarantees in this draft. One of them, Trevor Lawrence is going to be good. One of them, Penei Sewell is going to be really good. And the third one is that Kyle Pitts is going to be really good. Kyle Pitts is what the modern NFL is looking for in a weapon. He is the perfect tight end wide receiver hybrid. He's Darren Waller, but maybe better. And again, Darren Waller didn't become the player he was until just now. Well, not the beginning of his career and everything like that. You're getting Kyle Pitts when he's just 20, 21 years old. He'll be developed already by the time he's 23, 24 into that dominant type force. And I think not only would he be the best tight end on your football team, whoever drafts him, he'll be the best receiver on your team. And the Miami Dolphins just need weapons, period. And again, you don't have to box Kyle Pitts into the traditional tight end spot. I understand the Dolphins have a great tight end in Mike Gesicki. I think he's an up-and-coming young tight end. Reminds me a lot of Kelsey, actually. But if you want Pitts just to be a receiver, he'd be the best receiver in the Miami Dolphins right now. And we know that Brian Flores comes from New England, where they like to use multiple tight end sets, and they like to have multiple tight ends as weapons, specifically athletic tight ends. The Patriots had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez for a long time. That was pretty unstoppable. I could totally see the Miami Dolphins taking Kyle Pitts just because he is the best offensive weapon available in this draft. They can play him in the slot. They can play him out wide. They can put him on the line as a tight end. They can have 2 tight end sets with him and Gesicki. They can do whatever they want. But most importantly, Tua Tagovailoa needs a weapon. And Kyle Pitts is the best weapon in this draft class. And honestly, if you just wanted to look at him as a receiver, you could make that argument that he's close to Calvin Johnson when it comes to his size and speed thing. I'm not comparing him to Calvin Johnson. That's my pro comparison to him. But I do think he's going to be Darren Waller 2.0. And Darren Waller is just as good as a receiver as he is as a tight end. And you could say, if Darren Waller was just a receiver, he'd be a top 7 receiver in the league. And I think Kyle Pitts has the potential to be the best tight end in the league and a top 10 receiver in the league all in one. That's why I have him going to number 3. The Miami Dolphins. Coming in number 4, I have the Falcons. I think they will take quarterback. Again, I see Justin Fields as Ryan Tannehill, but a more talented version. Arthur Smith did wonders with Ryan Tannehill. I think sitting Justin Fields for a year, because I think there is an issue with going through progressions and reading defenses. Let him learn the playbook for an entire year. Make Ryan a 1-year contract instead of a 2-year deal when you deal him next offseason. And again, I think you could have a really, really nice young offensive course running around Calvin Ridley and Justin Fields. And again, once he gets that sort of football IQ, reading the defense type stuff down, he already has the physical nature and ability and the athletic ability to be a really special quarterback in this league. Coming in at number 4, I think the Falcons take Justin Fields with that 4th overall pick. Coming in at number 5, I have the Cincinnati Bengals taking Penei Sewell. I think it's clear that they need to protect Joe Burrow. They have enough weapons. I've seen a lot of Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase picks here at number 5, but I think the number 1 goal for the Bengals to keep Joe Burrow upright. They have Mixon, they have Boyd, they have T. Higgins, they have a lot of receivers that they can go to, not to mention via free agency, they could sign some guys in the cheap. I think Penei Sewell would be the best pick here. Again, him, Pitts, and Lawrence are the 3 can't-miss prospects in this year's draft class, in my opinion, and I think the Bengals get one of them at left tackle. With the 5th overall pick, I think they take Penei Sewell out of Oregon. With the 6th overall pick, I think the Eagles take the best pure receiver, if you want to call him that, Jamar Chase. I think he is a little bit better than Devontae Smith, but again, I don't think he's the best all-around pass catcher in this draft. I think that's Kyle Pitts. But Jamar Chase is a really great player. Reminds me of a faster Anquan Bolden a little bit. I could see, he's got that size and speed combination that you love at 6'1", 6'2", but can also run a sub-4, 540, maybe low 4.4s, maybe even 4.3s if you want to go all the way down there. And again, he's just a do-it-all receiver, and the Eagles don't have a single receiver on that roster that they trust, so they don't need just speed, they don't need just physicality, they need a mix of everything, and that's what Jamar Chase can offer them. So I think with the 6th overall pick, the Eagles go Jamar Chase. With the 7th overall pick, I think the Lions also go receiver and take Devonta Smith. They need a playmaker, they need a new face of the franchise since Matthew Stafford is gone. I think Devonta Smith would be perfect for that, the Heisman winner coming off of maybe the greatest season a wide receiver has ever had in college football. Pair him up with Jared Goff, who does well with some speedy receivers. Again, Devonta Smith reminds me a lot of Robert Woods. Jared Goff thrived in that system with a guy like Robert Woods. I also see a lot of Marvin Harrison in him. I think he'd be a great pickup for the Lions as a new face of that offense. And I think Goff and him could do some decent numbers in year 1. Coming in number 8, I think the Panthers will take Trey Lance. Again, I think they will be going after Deshaun Watson. Again, I think one of the Jets, Dolphins, and Panthers will get him eventually. But again, we don't know when or if the Texans will ever actually take calls for Watson. So I think they go quarterback here. And like I explained in the last segment, I think Trey Lance is a perfect fit for a team like the Panthers who can let him sit for a year, put all those tools together. And again, Joe Brady did wonders with Joe Burrow in college. Matt Rule was a really good offensive mind as well when he was at Temple and Baylor. I think this would be perfect for a young guy, Trey Lance, who's got all those physical tools, would thrive in a college-level offensive system. I think Joe Brady would do absolutely wonders with Trey Lance. So I have him going number 8 to the Carolina Panthers. Coming number 5, I think Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern would be perfect for Denver, and I think, again, they have a lot of different needs. I know that they need a quarterback potentially, but I think I've heard reports that Drew Lock will just be brought in with some competition like Nick Foles or Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think shoring up that offensive line that dealt with a lot of injuries on the right side like Jawan James and moving Slater into any of those tackle positions I think would be huge for this Denver Broncos offense going forward. So I have him going 9 there. And finally, with the 10th overall pick, I have the Dallas Cowboys taking Micah Parsons, the most versatile defensive player in this draft. Again, they could go corner like Patrick Surtain, but I think Jerry Jones will go with a little bit of a more versatile guy who can play a little bit of linebacker. Again, Van Der Esch has health concerns, isn't really fully healthy each and every year. Again, they need to rush the passer more as well. Parsons can do all those things while being sort of a safety coverage linebacker as well. So I think he does a little bit of everything, which is what that Dallas defense needs. So I have him going 10th. That's going to do it for my mock draft. I'll do another one of these a few weeks now from later when we again have more reports and more things like that. And who knows, maybe some trades will happen and maybe different teams will be picking in the top 10 by then. That's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this final short break, I'll be predicting each and every NBA award. We're at the All-Star break. Where do the awards stand? I'll give you who I have winning each award and why, coming up right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today's absolutely packed show. And I'm going to be giving you, really quickly here because we are running out of time, my award predictions for each and every NBA award. So let's just get right into it. I think the most improved player will go either down to two people. I think Zach LaVine or Julius Randle deserves it as of right now. If the Knicks do make the playoffs, I could see Julius Randle winning it because of just getting the Knicks to the playoffs, being the best player on that team. Again, Zach LaVine's also having an incredible year. Jaylen Brown's another name you could throw in there as well. But I think those three guys, but specifically Zach LaVine and Julius Randle, having absolutely incredible seasons for the team. If I had to pick one right now, I'd say Zach LaVine, but it's close. But man, he's having an absolutely incredible season for that Bulls team, really carrying them. And I think if I had to pick one, I think Zach LaVine would win most improved. For Sixth Man of the Year, I have it going to Jordan Clarkson of the Utah Jazz, best team in the West right now. I think they have the best overall record in the NBA, but Philadelphia might right now. Again, he's having the best Sixth Man of the Year campaign out of anybody right now. Another thing to keep an eye on is a guy like maybe Goran Dragic, if he stays healthy, obviously. But I think right now Jordan Clarkson is far and away the best guy when it comes to Sixth Man of the Year. Usually Lou Williams were, but he's having a little bit of a down year. But again, the Jazz are incredible. They're playing a lot like a team, and I think a lot of people deserve credit for how good they're doing. And I think Jordan Clarkson's definitely one of them. I think Joe Ingles of Utah could also get the consideration for that as well. There's a bunch of guys, but I think those people in particular have a chance. For Coach of the Year, I do think right now it would be Quinn Snyder, head coach of the Utah Jazz. I think they have the best record in the NBA right now. Nobody expected them to be this good. And again, they don't have a LeBron. They don't have a top 5 player. They have a bunch of really, really good, really, really great team guys. And of course, Donovan Mitchell, who's a superstar. But I think he deserves Coach of the Year for that reason. There isn't a LeBron, an AD, a KD, a Giannis, an MVP type level player on this team. So I would give a lot of the credit to Quinn Snyder, the coach, for being, where the Jazz are today. So I think he deserves Coach of the Year for that one. For the Defensive Player of the Year, again, there's a lot of names on this. I don't want to give every award to the Jazz, but I could see it going to Rudy Gobert. I'm going to go Bam Adebayo. I think a lot of people have taken notice of how versatile he is as a defender. The Heat are on a surge right now. And again, if they have a really good second half of the season and finish top 4 in the East, I could see Bam Adebayo getting the Defensive Player of the Year nod. For Rookie of the Year, I think it's going to be LaMelo Ball, and I think he's running away with it. He is far and away the best rookie. A lot of other rookies have shown some flashes, guys, have had some highlight players or some big-time shots, some big-time moments, but LaMelo Ball, night in, night out, is maybe the best player on this Charlotte team, not named Gordon Hayward. And again, he's just absolutely surging, handling the NBA better than I think even, his dad maybe have even expected, handling better than Lonzo did. And, I think he's a runaway Rookie of the Year so far. For comeback player of the year, I think we all know this is probably going to be Kevin Durant, assuming that he stays healthy the second half of the season. He's having close to a career year despite coming off an Achilles injury, and he deserves it. All the credit in the world for how good the Nets are this year, and especially if they make the finals, I think KD does and should win comeback player of the year. And finally, for MVP, I do think as of right now, Joel Embiid is the MVP. Now, that could change depending how good the Nets do and teams like how the Lakers do and things like that. But right now, I think Joel Embiid is absolutely the best player in the league right now. From an MVP standpoint, I think, there's better players in the league like KD, LeBron. I'd have them over Joel Embiid. But right now, this season, Joel Embiid deserves to be the MVP. Again, Philadelphia, it's always been about him in the process. Things are finally starting to fall into place for the 76ers, and the biggest reason for that is because of Joel Embiid, and I think he deserves MVP, and I think he could also get some consideration for Defensive Player of the Year as well. That's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, again brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I've been your host, Alex Masper, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.